21st, 2024. We are the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council. Nova, could we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Here.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Here.
Mayor Potter?
Yeah.
All are present.
Let's note that Councilmember Ferlito is calling in from 220 Madison Avenue, New York, live. Very nice. All right, so we're going to go ahead. We're back from our inspection. We're going to go commence the meeting. The first item is receive a presentation on fiscal year 2024-2025 budget, conduct a public workshop, and provide direction to staff. Brandon.
Evening, Mayor and Council. We are here, as you said, to present our recommended budget for a workshop tonight with you and the community. So really quickly, just some background on this. As you know, we've been taking budget questions since our last meeting. Tonight is our workshop. We'll be answering some of those questions, but all of those questions were answered in the packet that came out to you. What we're really here tonight to talk about is really to get direction from you moving forward onto that meeting coming up June 4th, which will be for adoption of this budget. So the purpose of tonight is we're going to give you an overview of the recommended budget, talk about revenue, we're going to talk about expenditures, and we're going to talk about fund balance, and ultimately we're going to get that direction. And I want to pause here for a minute just to discuss, philosophically for a minute what the budget is. The budget really is how we run our business here at the city, how the business of the city. How are we going to run this next year? And our business really is to serve the community. So everything that you see contained in the budget is about service. How do we serve the residents of this community? It's why we exist as an institution, as a city. We will see this as a theme as we move forward. So just really quickly at a high level, budget at a glance, you've seen all this before. Our projected revenue for next year is roughly $31.5 million. Expenses are roughly $43.9. That means that the budget is not balanced operationally, but we can budget it structurally through the use of fund balance to the tune of about $12.6 million. That's unassigned fund balance, and we'll get into that a little bit later. There have been a couple of small edits or changes since we met back in early May. There's been $6,000 added to the City Council community promotions for 2 additional discretionary grants, and $31,000 added to liability insurance premium based on updated estimates. So now we're going to talk about revenue. So we're going to break the presentation into 2 parts tonight. The first part's going to be revenue. This is the monies that we take in order to provide that service that I talked about, to do the business of the city, which is to serve the residents. We're going to talk about where the money comes from, discuss some trends about where we see this going into the future, talk about what our major streams of revenue are, and then look at what the future might be as we move forward even farther down the road. So where does it all come from? Roughly 83% of our revenue comes from the big 3. These are our sales taxes, our property taxes, and our transient occupancy tax. You can see to the tune of about $26 million up there on the screen. Trending this out, you can see this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. We were seeing an increase, and then that big dip, as we all know, is when we were dealing with the pandemic. But the trend we're seeing out into the future is a flattening of these revenue sources. We're not seeing at this point, or predicting at least anyway, a major dip, but we are seeing a flattening, which really is driving our position on the budget now and into the future. Just a couple of things in the news, things that we all know are going on. Inflation seems to be persistent, although recently they did slow. The most it's slowed in a long time. Gradual growth of home sales. None of these are really a surprise, but when we do this budgeting with you and with the community, it's not just about what's going on in the city, because what's going on in the greater world also does impact what's going on here in our tiny, wonderful little village. This slide here speaks to the performance of those revenue generators. As you can see, the yellowish line is TOT. We are projecting, again, that dip or flattening afterwards. And our sales and property taxes, again, on a slight upward trend. As you might imagine, property taxes are going to continue upward, but it's not a large number. It is a pretty flat increase over time. So again, this reinforces the trend that we're seeing of a flattening over time. So outside of those major three, the next big revenue source, roughly 8% of our budget, comes from charges for service. And you can see how this is broken down throughout the budget. Community planning and building accounts for about $1.3 million of that $2.5 million. But this is also fees for public safety, ambulance, community activities, $2.6 million there. The other revenue source that rounds us out is about $3 million. This is 9% roughly, and you can see what makes that up here on the screen. So as I mentioned, our general revenue outlook, we do intend and plan and forecast to end the fiscal year in good form. We remain diligent but cautious as we face that economic uncertainty that I talked about. We still just can't put our finger exactly on what's going to go on in the future. We're not sure what the new reality is going to be. We've seen a trend in decreased hotel occupancy, which thankfully has been offset by an increase in hotel rates. But there's always going to be a point where those no longer can support each other. So the rates will have to continue to go up if we see occupancy going down, and people perhaps will not pay that higher rate anymore. So we can't predict a continued upward trend on that. So we don't know where those trends are going to go in the future. We want to take a position sort of in the middle. I like to say that we're confident and guarded in where we're going into the future. So our tactics remain conservative. And it'll be nice to come back and chat with you in mid-year, as we often do, about what we're seeing in the reality of the world. We will likely have more ideas and thoughts for you about those trends into the future. But at this point, we are confident in our revenue to be able to provide those services that we talked about earlier to our community and to our residents. So with that, I'm going to pause for just a minute after the revenue discussion to see if there's any questions, or if the council wants to just keep going into the expenditures. Do we want to talk about revenues at this point, or would you like to keep going?
Council members, your preference?
I have no questions.
Okay. Seeing none, we will continue on to the ever exciting world of expenditures. Thank you for your patience as I switch the slides there. So once again, the reason we exist as an entity is to serve the community. And the way we serve the community is by spending money. It's a pretty simple equation, actually. We saw this slide already, so I'm not going to go over that again. We've seen this year after year, and this is my first year in this position, and I think as long as I'm in this position or another position to present a budget, my take on this is that everything we do serves the community in some way or another. In the past, we've talked about, the community and the CIP. That's $25 million there invested in the village. I really believe that, our employees that come to work every day and serve our community, all the way down to the debt service that we have on things like the Sunset Center, all of those things that we've spent our money on serve the community as a whole. So I don't look at this as certain parts of our budget serve the community. I look at it more that every part of our budget serves the community. So at a glance, high level, you can see our top two expenses, as you might imagine, are our salaries and our capital improvements. Really no big surprises there. We've got our famous dollar bill slide here, so as you drill down a little bit farther, these are the services that we provide to the community, paid for by those revenue dollars. These are broken out into the different service areas. So you've got your fire department, your police department, the planning department, the library, public works. Everything here is represented, even down to the five of you, the city council, serving the community in the capacity that you do, and how we break up those revenue dollars to accomplish that goal, as I mentioned, which is our business and our reason for existence. At a glance, here's how the staffing shakes out. We talked about this at the last meeting. We are anticipating a roughly one full-time equivalent employee increase for next year. This does represent a rebalancing. As I mentioned, there are 4 positions coming out of the police department that should have been taken out in the last budget. They were not filled. We're using this to install more employees in areas like public works and planning that can fulfill some of those service goals, again, serving our community that the city council and the community has asked for over the past years. Drilling down one level, this is now looking at how the staffing and salaries and benefits shake out among the different departments. As you might imagine, the police department is towards the top there, followed closely by public works. Not much to say about that, so I'll just let you look at that chart. And then we're going to go even deeper through each department just quickly as a glance, so you can see not only at the staffing level, but services and supplies, where the money's going and how it's being spent, what some of the bigger ticket items are. So we'll start with city council. I know the city council is a department. It doesn't feel like it, but it is in our budget. So you'll see where the money's going there. Some of the big ticket items are the discretionary grants, the mail service, memberships. These are all things, again, that serve the community in one way or the other. Our city attorney, the legal fees, we are keeping flat. They're, keeping our city safe from litigation. It's another wonderful service. Office of the City Administrator, we're looking at things like a new agenda system, IT infrastructure and system. Joel helps keep our infrastructure safe from hacks all the time. Another wonderful service to our community. Non-departmental, so this is where we see things like our unfunded liability, our utilities, things that keep the lights on and keep the wheels turning. One thing to highlight here, just to put a bug in your ear, it's not necessarily something you have to deal with this year, but we'll certainly be talking about it next year, is that in FY 25-26, we will see the last year of the programmed $1 million installment of the pension liability mitigation. So we'll need to have a conversation about that into the future. So one of the questions, I'm going to pepper a few questions in here. As I mentioned, we went through 38 questions that we received, and thank you to everyone who took the time to do that. The staff report package does have answers to all those questions. So we're going to pepper a few of these in here. So one of the questions we got is, do we have any projections out several decades of what our pension costs with this level of staffing will be? We kept the staffing static, and as you can see, if we project it out to FY 29 and 30, our liability is up to about $3.2 million annually. For some reference, this year we're estimating $2.4 million. But again, this is a bit of a variable. It has to do with how many employees we have. It has to do with what's going on with CalPERS, but this is the best we can project out at this point. It certainly, as you can see, as no surprise, is an upward trend into the future. The next department, or this area of our government, of our budget, basically, or department, is marketing and economic development. This is where you see things like Visit Carmel, the Visitors Board, the Sunset Center operating grant. Again, I'm trying to stick with the theme of serving the community. A lot of the things in this bucket help to bring in visitors, which drive that major revenue pillar that allows us to provide those services. And one of the benefits of controlling that marketing and bringing in the visitors is that we can drive multi-day travelers, and we have reduced footprint. We really have better control over what the visitation looks like. That helps drive and keep those services online for our residents. The next department to look at is the library. You can see contract services. There's not a lot in the library, and as we all know, the library budgetarily functions a little bit different than every other department because of their endowment and their dealings with the board. The next one is community activities. We do have contract services for things like farmers market and promotions throughout the community, which again, another service factor. The next one up is community planning and building. We have largely grant-funded efforts, things like the affordable housing studies, the historic context statement update, the safety element to some extent as well for our general plan. These are all services that help by managing the character of our city, keeping everyone feeling like they know where they're at, and it feels like the Carmel-by-the-Sea that they want it to feel like. We've got some training and education in there as well. Next up is public works. We've got, the maintenance of our city buildings and streetscapes, our buildings and roads. We've also got our environmental programs that really help protect the watersheds, reduce invasive plants, deal with waste hauling, making sure that our city is beautiful and clean, and providing that service to the residents. Next up is our ambulance services. You can see the numbers there. I don't really have to explain to you how all of our safety and first responder personnel serve the community, so I'll buzz through these relatively quickly. Ambulance, our firefighters, and our police. These are all clearly major service factors, and one of the things to note is that we will be talking a little bit more in the future about the ambulance service, but that's not something to dive into tonight.
Brandon, if I can stop you there, one of the questions we received was why per capita, so per head, per person of resident, the residents enjoy about $10,000 per person of services. And that's largely, a mathematical formula, right? Our budget is $31 million, divided by 3,000 is roughly $10,000. If you look at Pacific Grove, which has roughly the same budget size as we do, but it has 5 times as many residents, naturally, the investment in those residents will be about 1/5. There are some services that have a baseline cost. So we pay, again, about the same amount for fire protection as the city of Pacific Grove. But since we have fewer residents, it costs the residents per capita more than it does, about 5 times more, than in Pacific Grove. But again, that's the base level of service. So the same can be held for our police department as well. Now, I argue to you every year that we provide a higher level of service than many other communities, and I'll stick with that. Just the outreach and education and personalization that we do on a regular basis. But that's a very important factor to understand. Again, it's because we have 2.6, 2.7 million people who visit here a year, probably 7,000 to 8,000 people per day. And our revenue sources largely come, as we've seen, 2/3 of those major pillars from visitor trade and traffic. And again, we have to respond to the impacts associated with those visitors by providing those higher level of services. Brendan had a slide a minute ago that talked about the custodial work. And again, Cleve Waters, and he's got a contract service, but the restrooms in the summer are cleaned, Bob, 6 or 7 or 8 times a day. I mean, that's how heavily used they are. And again, but that's one of the, again, to riff off of what Brandon said, that's a basic level of service that we have to maintain to preserve the character of the village. So thank you, Brandon.
No, thanks, Chip. That's such a good point. I mean, I almost want to just restate it a little bit and just make it clear that these services that we rely on, that any city really needs: police, fire, ambulance, and to some extent libraries and parks. Just to have them in existence, you start with a cost. It's not like scalable necessarily for the number of people in a village. So thank you for bringing that up, Chip. That's a really good point. The next area to talk about is debt service. Sticking with my theme of service, this is kind of a freebie because it's in the title, but just kidding. The debt service, it really does have to do with Sunset Center. Like I said, this has to do with the remodel of Sunset Center, which again serves the community, but you can see what the numbers are right there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Harari for a couple slides, who's going to talk about our capital improvement.
Thank you. I'll take this away. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. So to just kind of recap the capital improvement program for the vehicle and equipment funded projects that are shown here. There's 2 carryovers and 6 new items. Staff is recommending that we continue on with all of them. Just real brief, the fire engine and the ambulance, it's $1.2 million of investment back into the community. Delivery for both is scheduled for December 2025. Public Works has a dump truck from 1995 that is deceased. It died in late 2022. We need a new one. It's a critical element of our department for both forestry and street projects. Police need a new patrol vehicle. This will be an electric vehicle. This will replace the 2017 that is nearing the end of its useful life, and it's starting to break down quite a bit. Back in 2021, we bought 22 police radios, so it's a lease. This will be year 4 of 6 of the lease. Council chambers, AV, audio visual equipment, $70,000 to better facilitate our Zoom meetings and our hybrid meetings and get more community input. The core networks and firewalls are essential for IT equipment to keep our computers in good shape, and the equipment is replacing equipment has exceeded its useful life.
Yeah, Bob, if I can jump in, I recently learned of a city that was, their systems were not as robust as ours, and they were hacked, and they're being held for ransom, and the hackers want somewhere between, they're negotiating with the hackers, but between 5 and 10% of their general fund.
Wow.
And that's just to allow them to get back into the system. The malware, the virus, the worms, they actually destroyed 40 computers in the city that will all have to be replaced outside paying that ransom. And some of the data that was stolen is actually employees' personal information, members of their family, birth date, social security numbers. So it really has the potential to go a lot deeper. So, Council, you've always, you've never argued about investing in our core systems to protect us. And I just want to thank Mr. Staker in the back of the room with the fine beard for doing a great job at ensuring that we do have a safe system for our employees and our residents. So thanks, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Chip. Okay, so again, we're recommending that we proceed with all these vehicle and equipment funded projects. Moving on to the capital projects. There's 23 capital projects, 4 of which we're going to be discussing as potential to defer. They're important projects, but they could potentially be deferred. So starting with the street improvement projects, the first one is a conglomerate project that we've talked about in the prior 2 updates on the capital program. This is a $2.8 million project. This would include the fiscal year 24 paving project in its entirety, 4 bid additives from the fiscal year 22 project that's just finished construction, and the San Antonio and Ocean Avenue intersection reconstruction from the concrete street projects. Total will have 21 slurry street improvements, 9 overlays, and 5 sidewalk repairs, plus that intersection. Second is the San Antonio pathway. The plans are in the building department for a building plan check. We're expediting it as fast as we can. Plan to go out to bid in about a month, and we'll be under construction this fall on the reconstruction. Next up is the Sunset Center, I believe, yeah, Sunset Center retaining walls. There are 6 walls, some very small and some larger, that must be repaired all around the Sunset Center site. We're at 90% design in that one. The next is the Lincoln and 4th Trestle Bridge. This is a 90-year-old wooden bridge. We maintain it all the time, but it's starting to get wobbly. So we need to get a structural engineer to do a thorough evaluation and see what kind of repairs are necessary. Ocean Avenue, Carpenter to Highway 1. This is one of the projects that we'll consider or discuss for potential deferring, but let's come back to that in a little bit. Next is the Mission Trail Nature Preserve, the 3 stream drainage projects. We're just there at Mission Trail Nature Preserve, so that project was just awarded by council in the tune of $438,000, and we'll be getting started on that construction next month. Next is the drainage system repairs. There's 4 projects, 3 of which are high priority from our storm drain master plan update. The design is essentially complete, but we're having a little bit of legal challenges and easements and some environmental issues. So we're on the home stretch, but we have a little bit of a glitch. Hope to get out to bid by the end of the year. And then the Junipero bypass drainage improvements. This would be for the design of another the highest priority storm drain master plan project. We're going to suggest that's a possible one to defer, so we'll come back to that. Next is the police building. The original budget was $3.3 million. We're still showing that because it's carryover. We have about $2.7 million remaining. We've expended roughly $150,000 on project management services. We've encumbered $300,000 for the architect, of which we spend about half because they're half done. And we've done a little over $100,000 of urgent safety repairs in the building over the last year and a half, including electrical work and steel doors and things like that. The plan at this point is to continue on with public listening sessions and meetings, go forward with ask the architect to go forward with schematic design, look at a couple options. Hopefully by the end of next fiscal year, we'll have selected a specific option and start the design of that option, although no construction is anticipated next fiscal year. ADA upgrades for year 7. This has been a really successful program to make improvements throughout the village and various buildings for improvements for disabled. Next is the Norton Court Garage Security System. It's just two card readers for 2 access doors. The system now is just completely, it no longer functions, so we want to get that secure. Next is the Sunset Center North Lot electrical panel. We have a good game plan going for that one. PG&E is going to install a transformer at no cost to the city, and we'll be using that transformer with a new panel to install new electric vehicle charging stations all along the west wall of Sunset Center, and the people will have discounted energy rates, which is great. Part of that same project is to relocate the panel off of the ramp and have a second meter for the parking lot lights as a commercial rates. Next is the Vista Lobos 3 EV charging stations and a building electrical panel. PG&E is also providing a free transformer that's already been approved by the council. This project will go right into construction. We're ready to go. It's to have an electrical contractor install the charging stations and to completely replace the, I'll call it unsafe, building electrical panel on the side of the building. Facility renovations, there's 2 projects remaining. One is the City Hall roof. We had a pre-bid meeting last week. We had 8 bidders this time. Last time we actually bid it, we only had 2, so hopefully we'll get more competitive bids. And the other facility renovation project, the Sunset Center cottage windows, which goes out to bid at the end of this week. Next is the Mission Trail Nature Preserve Doolittle Bridge. Although we did our tour an hour ago, this is another one that could be deferred, so we'll come back to that in a little bit. And then Scenic Pathway Hardscape renovations. This is a joint project with Carmel Cares, 100,000 by us, 100,000 by the volunteer group. Earlier this month, the Forest and Beach Commission approved the design concepts, like extending barrier rails and widening the pathway, adding DG, that type of thing. So that project is ready to launch. We're working on an encroachment permit with them now. Next up, the environmental category and the beach, we have the Coastal Engineering Study Phase 2, $500,000 local coastal program grant. So it's entirely funded by the grant. This was a high priority project that was in the climate action, climate adaptation plans. Phase 1 is done. Phase 2 is underway. And we're going to be starting a fairly robust community outreach program on Phase 2 here pretty soon. The next 2 kind of go together, shoreline infrastructure repairs and the shoreline wall 4th Avenue outfall. We have a request for proposal that's hitting the street this week as well. This is to hire a coastal engineering firm to design the structural repairs for 2 stairways. One is at 12th, and the other is at 10th Avenue North, to assess all the remaining stairs, revetments, and seawalls, and to also design a replacement of the 4th Avenue, which also includes the drainage outfall in its entirety. So that's one combined project that's about to get underway. Next up is the PG&E Rule 28 undergrounding. So by the end of this calendar year, we hope to have council adopt 1 or 2 underground utility districts. The 2 proposed, one is at the Del Mar parking lot, the other one's along the Willow Trail. Once the district is adopted and we apply to PG&E, then we've encumbered the remaining funds of $667,000, though that won't be grabbed away. Next up is Library Master Plan, Phases 2 through 4. The master plan was presented to council back in April with the library director. And this is essentially carryover funding from this current fiscal year. And the plan would be to start on the main library renovation design. The next up is the branch library windows and dry rot replacement, or dry rot treatment and repairs. This is another potential project to defer. We'll come back to that. Last but not least is the CIP contingency. We're suggesting $400,000. It's not a project per se, it's a funding source. But for this current fiscal year, we had $500,000. We used every penny for 5 different projects to award contracts and to close out projects. So it proved to be successful. We recommend that we continue it. If we look at all the projects as a whole, we're looking at $12.6 million. On the pie chart, you can see it's a beautiful pie chart that Jane Hogan did a fantastic job with all the colors. Facilities would be 35% of the pie. And it's really kind of skewed because 3 million is the police station. 31% is streets, 14% drainage, 9% to environmental and shoreline repairs, and all the other miscellaneous is about 10% of the pie. Now we're moving on to projects that could be deferred. Now the reasons that we're even suggesting that to defer these projects, for 3 reasons. One is the council and the community and others have expressed concern about the scale of the expenses on our capital program. It's a lot of money. Second is we want to trim down on the use of project management consultants. So how can we possibly do that? And last is that all of these projects, this next word, they're important projects, but they're less time sensitive. They're important, they're less time sensitive than the other 20-something that we just reviewed. So the first one, in no particular order, is that Doolittle Bridge and pathway realignment. The need is that it's the 4th of 8 stream stability improvements that was in the Mission Trail Creek study. It's also for pedestrian safety, so there is a need. The plan was for the next fiscal year, $175,000 for environmental permitting. You saw that the concrete was in the creek, so right there, that's a lot of environmental permits. The design of the new bridge, and the following year would be about $125,000 for construction. The consideration is that the next fiscal year includes construction of the 3 stream drainage projects that are adjacent to this one. So we're still doing something in the preserve. This would be, a 4th one that needs to be done, but certainly we can defer it for 1 year or more years, if that's the council wish. Next one is the Junipero Bypass Drainage Project. This one kind of gave me a little bit of upset stomach, but it's a high priority project. It's probably the highest in our storm drain master plan update because it's eliminated a key bottleneck. The cost is $175,000. It's designed in 2 phases. One is along Junipero between 7th and 9th, which is the most important one. But while we're designing it, we might as well do Junipero between 5th and 7th. Construction the following year, it's at least $1.5 million. And if we do both phases, it could be $2.5 million. So it's a lot of money coming down the pike. Consideration is that next fiscal year, we have construction of 3 other high priority drainage repair projects, about $1.2 million. Recommendation is to defer this. If that's the desire of the council, we could defer this just for 1 year. I wouldn't recommend anything more than that. Next up is the Park Bench Library windows and the dry rot. The need is that there's 18 windows that fog up. Some are cracked and it's not sealed tight anymore. And we have dry rot around some of the windows and trim. The cost was $45,000. And that's the thought there was to hire one contractor to get it done all at once. Consideration is that we could do this incrementally as facility maintenance projects. So if it wasn't a capital project, we'd still get it done through our facility maintenance budget, but over time. So our recommendation would be, okay, next year, let's just worry about the dry rot. Let's fix that first. And then the following year, whether it's a capital project or continue on as facility maintenance, it'd be another $30,000 to replace the windows. Last up is Ocean Avenue, Carpenter to Highway 1. The need is certainly there. Highly deteriorated pavement along our principal arterial from Highway 1 into our downtown area. This is in the county. The cost would be borne by the county, so we're not looking at saving money here. The initial estimate from the county was $500,000. My opinion is that that's the cost of the paving. My opinion is that the real cost of the whole project is in the $1 to $2 million range. A consideration is that the county claims that they'll do the project within a few years. If we do the project, it'll still take a couple of years. We'd probably get it done a little faster, but it's not going to be done in a year. It's a couple of years. Recommendation is that we don't abandon ship, but we support the county's efforts to advance the project. Let them take the lead role. It's a lot of time investment, a lot of potential risk. We could certainly help. We could serve on their selection committees to select engineering firms. We could help with the public outreach. We could check the plans. We could help them. Let them take the lead. This would be our recommendation. And with that, I'll turn that back over to Brandon.
All right, thanks, Bob. So we just talked about capital improvement projects, and as Bob noted, it's a large number, and the reason we're able to fund those is by using what we've been referring to as fund balance. And so this was a thematic question across the Q&A that we had, and so I want to take a minute to try to better explain this, and we'll continue to refine our explanation of this because it's not the most simple thing to explain, but a good way to think about fund balance is that it is the bucket. Fund balance is a bucket that holds the difference between our revenues that are generated and what we actually spend. So the figure on the left that looks like a old school waste paper bucket, those are the different years. You can see June 30th, 23, 24, and 25. So as you move from June 30th, 2023, we had a total fund balance of 32.7. And as we were going into 2024, we had a $4.6 million surplus, meaning the difference between those revenues and expenditures was a surplus. And so that got added to the fund balance. As we move from 24 into 25, we expect a $12.5 million deficit, which is the number that we're using to fund the capital improvement projects. So that's how we're getting to that number. Now, these pie charts that you see on the right, imagine that you're looking down into this bucket for each of those 3 years. So as you look down on June 30th, 2024, the fund balance is made up of restricted, reserved, and unassigned fund amounts to those different dollar values that you can see up there. Same is true for the estimate in June 30 of 2025. You can see that it goes from 15 million to 2.4. That's that $12.5 million that we're using to fund the capital improvement projects.
And that, if I may, Brendan,
Please.
a couple comments. So number one, you'll see that the fund balance, since we're tapping into it to the tune of $12.5 million, it doesn't last forever. And that's why we've been talking about either one of two things, reducing expenditures or increasing revenue, because that's the balance. Fund balance results, as Brandon has said, but I just want to reiterate it, when we always budget revenue very conservatively, and we budget expenditures somewhat liberally. We often exceed our revenue projections, but again, there's no crystal ball. This year with Highway 1 being washed out, and Ms. Herzog is behind Brandon again, even though it just reopened, we didn't see the visitors who travel from San Francisco to Los Angeles along Highway 1, along the edge of the, along the edge of the ocean, basically. So that impacts our transit occupancy tax and sales tax through the limited number of visitors who come here. And that may be a result of decreased occupancy. Again, we've talked about this every year. If there's snow in Tahoe, who knows whether people are going to go skiing or come here. If there are fires in the Sierras, then again, we get the fire refugees that come here. So, but there's no way of predicting what's going to happen. So again, we do our best, and again, not all of our expenditures will come true in a fiscal year, and our revenues, again, because we budget them relatively conservatively, we often exceed them. But that's the balancing act that we go through, and then at the end of the year, when we end the year in the black, because again, remember, we have to adopt a balanced budget. The federal government does not. The state's still deciding what they want to do, but we have to, by statute, adopt a balanced budget. But anything that we end the fiscal year with any additional funds, they roll into the fund balance, as Brandon has described, and they accumulate there until, at your discretion, we appropriate and spend them. Thank you.
That's great, Chip. Thanks. And so transitioning from what Chip was just explaining, looking down into these buckets of the overall fund balance, the whole pie, you've got your restricted, reserved, and unassigned. This is a simple sort of way to look at this. The coins at the top represent the totality of the fund balance. On the left there are the restricted and reserved funds. That's why they have a lock and key on them. They're much more difficult to get into. We stay away from those. Those include our 15% that we put away every year as a percentage of the general fund. We've only ever had to tap into these once, and that was during the pandemic. That's the restricted and reserved funds. On the right-hand side are the unassigned fund balance amounts. This is part of that pie, part of looking down into the bucket. These funds can be used. They're much more liquid. That's why the treasure chest is open, is because you can dip into them to balance things like capital improvement projects. So that's what this slide is meant to sort of illustrate for you. And in response to this thematic question that we got over and over again. And it's a good question in our Q&As. The other question I wanted to make sure we just touched on really quickly is there's a lot of talk about these extraordinary and large projects, things like the police building, undergrounding, seawall repairs. And so the question that we got, again, sort of thematically across the overall multiple questions we got was, what are those projects and what are the options for funding them? Bonds, state or federal grants, what else? And is there going to be public engagement when we get to that conversation about funding? So the response here is that none of the projects that we're talking about that raise to this level that will require money outside of our operational budget are far enough along to understand their total fiscal impact yet. We're still too early in the process. So all those projects like the police building, undergrounding, very well could require additional funding outside what our normal revenue streams can talk about. We talked earlier, revenues come in and we spend them. We're gonna have to probably come up with some other sort of revenue source to balance the budget. As Chip said, we have to balance the budget every year. So if we decide to undertake a project, we get a real bid on something, we're gonna have to figure out how to balance that cost. So as those projects become more refined and we continue to have community meetings, ad hoc meetings, the city will have a better understanding of actually how much money we need. And at that point, we'll be able to have a conversation about how we're going to fund those, get feedback from our community and from you, the city council, on how to approach that, where we find those revenues to balance that budget. So with that, that is the end of our presentation. Before I hand it over to you, I want to make sure this time, because I didn't last time, I want to thank all the city staff, all the department heads that were involved in putting this together, all of the residents, all the questions we got were very thoughtful, very respectful. It was clear that people took the time to read this budget. I want to thank all the administrative staff that helped put together this meeting. Most importantly, I want to highlight Jane Hogan, who is the mastermind behind all the charts and everything that you saw. I'm just up here babbling. She did all the hard work. So thank you to Jane very much for all the work that you did on this budget. And with that, I will hand it over to you and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Brandon. Any questions by Councilmember?
I have a question. Brandon, on one of the slides with the reserve restricted funds, the locked treasure chest, it said you anticipate, or there was 15 million in it, right? There was, well, anyway, there was one slide that had 15 million, and then the next year it had 15.3 million. So is that saying that we are adding $300,000 in our restricted funds this fiscal year?
That's our estimate based on what we see coming in from revenues.
So the restricted funds is growing?
The reserve funds are growing.
Reserve
correct.
restricted funds?
Yeah. You're correct. The total of reserved and restricted together is growing.
And then the surplus, just so we're clear, the surplus comes from money that we have for capital or for projects, whatever it may be, and what we didn't spend. And so that's the surplus.
The surplus is, so all the revenues that we're estimating, revenue coming in from TOT, sales tax, all those revenues that we're supposing are going to come in, we balance those against our budget. This is everything. This is, staff time, maintenance fees, everything like that. At the end of the year, if we do our job correctly, as Chip said, we budget conservatively on both ends. We budget conservatively for revenue, so hopefully at the end of the year we get more revenue than we expected, and we budget conservatively for expenses, so hopefully we spend less than we expected. That delta, that difference, is what then goes into the big pile of coins at the top. And then that gets split into either reserved and restricted funds based on where the money came from and what it's supposed to be used for, or it goes into the unassigned fund balance, which then can be used as more liquid to fund things like capital improvement programs.
So is it fair to say that the surplus is coming from the hotels, restaurants, and retail doing a good job?
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, I mean, that's as one of the major pillars of our revenue that certainly contributes to that. Yes.
Well, it's two of the major ones.
That's right.
The property tax we can't do much about.
Sure.
And then the fourth and smaller one are the fees that we charge.
Yes, yeah, fees for service.
And then I would think that another one of the reasons why we have surplus is proper spending, or spending so that we're not overspending for things or staffing or any of these things, right? We're budgeting that time.
We're budgeting, and I will say, as a department head, coming down from Chip, who is, as a human being, naturally fiscally conservative, he drives us as department heads to be cognizant of our costs throughout the year.
Okay. All right, thank you, Brandon.
And, you know, I think an important nuance, Mr. Richards, is that we're only going to use fund balance for one-time expenses. Because again, we don't know whether it's going to be there in the future. So we wouldn't hire an employee, which is an ongoing liability, you know, ongoing expense, based on the assumption that there will be fund balance in the future to pay for them.
That would have been budgeted for in the
Operating budget.
operating budget,
Yeah,
right?
Other questions or council members?
I've got two questions. Brandon, this wasn't part of the presentation today, so I don't know if you'll be able to access it, but in the material that was in the agenda packet, there was something called Exhibit B, and it was the chart with the 5-year financial forecast. Is there any way to access that?
Yeah, I have it sort of in my back pocket.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, I anticipated.
Okay.
So was it this?
It was page 24 out of 28.
Oops.
The fund balance chart?
Yes.
There's two. There should be two. One for our projection and this fiscal year, and then one for our projection for next fiscal year.
And this one had it was a very full chart with a 5-year financial forecast.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Different one.
Yeah,
This is one of my favorite charts.
well.
It really is. It's really kind of.
This goes right to my question. Since this is very important, but maybe both of you could just talk about it so the public can understand more of what's on there and what the implications are, especially as we go in the coming years.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this question. We debated whether to put this in the regular part of the presentation. That's why I had it queued up, because it is a great chart. I didn't want people's brains to explode when I put all these numbers up on the screen. But basically, the conversation we were just having with Councilmember Richards about, you know, conservatively budgeting, using our fund balance to offset costs. There's a point in time you can see right here, FY 27, 28, where we anticipate that the fund balance, there won't be enough there if the trends continue. There won't be enough there to balance the budget with just the fund balance. We'll need to find some other sort of revenue source or make some sort of expenditure cut. Because remember, the reason fund balance exists and the reason we're able to balance is because the expenditures are less than we expect and the revenue that comes in is more than we expect. I will say one caveat here to note is that all the numbers in purple here, so 25, 26, 26, 27, right here, if you look at the capital outlay, those numbers, those amounts, those are what are in your CIP right now, and those are large numbers. If you look historically, what happens is typically we plan for a number in our CIP and we use maybe say like 50% of it, 60% of it. So it's likely that this point in time, 27, 28, is going to be a few years farther out into the future, because we probably won't spend all of the CIP money that's up here on the chart, but this is using what we have in front of us as a CIP to plan for. So again, very conservative. This is how we like to do our budget here, is very conservative. So this is the most conservative approach. If every year Bob does a wonderful job and spends every dollar of CIP, then this would be what we would expect. But it's unlikely because that has not been the trend.
Got it. Thank you. And then my next question, you did have a chart. It was the one that had to do with the police positions that have been removed, and either you and or the chief can talk about that. If we could just explain the reason for some of that, and if I understand it, it's because of the reduced policing model contract that was adopted from the previous council, where positions were eliminated, but the officers were given large pay increases. But now it looks like what's happening is because of overtime, since there's lack of staff, some of the officers, this was in the Pine Cone, were getting like $250,000, $280,000 a year. So that seems like we're spending an awful lot there, and that might not be able to be sustained, especially if we want to hire an additional officer. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about the reduction in the numbers of police officers.
Do you want to take this one, or you want me to?
Let me try, because
Okay.
the chief wasn't here, and
Yeah, that's why I wanted him to do it.
I negotiated this. Yeah. So yeah, the model was that we were going to remove the corporal positions, which are supervisorial, and add responsibility to the officers for things like investigations and backgrounds, and basically providing more responsibility for officers, and then reducing our sergeant corps to just 2 as well. And so again, it was the vision was to provide the officers more upward mobility, more education, more experience that they wouldn't get unless they were in again, the supervisorial corporal sergeant a lieutenant, whatever positions that we have higher up in the hierarchy. And so it's a 3-year contract with our Police Officers Association. And at that point in time, next year, we're going to do a look back to see whether it's working. Again, Chief Tomasi was not here when I negotiated this contract, and at that point in time, Councilmember Dramoff, he may have a model that's different than the one that we built here. The salary increases that were negotiated were again based on the assumption that the officers would be taking on more responsibility. It was never meant to. You're exactly correct that our overtime is high. Right now, all the positions are not filled yet, correct, Chief? Right. And, but hopefully, again, when we fill all the positions, that overtime expenditure will flatten to some degree. But again, next year, we'll have the chance to relook at the model, the operating model, and determine whether it's working for the city, for, again, the police chief serving the community, as well as our budgeting purposes.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you both.
Other questions, council members? All right, so I have a couple questions of Bob from Public Works. Bob, when we had the discussion last year about the retaining wall here at the parking lot here, the retaining wall repair was going to be done here. We also talked about possibly repaving the parking lot here, and that didn't seem to happen.
Yes, sir, we did. Mr. Pierik's on the line. We were hoping that we could use our parking and loof fund,
Right.
and we cannot. There was an idea at the end of this paving season to use funds to slurry seal the parking lot. And Bob, what happened with?
City Hall roofers need the parking lot to do the roof. I don't want to.
So they're going to trash it. So
Yes.
So hopefully after we
waited this long,
re-roof.
we're going to redo the roof in a few months, and then Public Works, we were going to do it ourselves, actually.
Good.
Or there was also the thought of having MPE using the little balance we have in our paving contract to do it. And that's still a possibility, but we should defer. Let's not tear up a brand new parking lot.
Are you suggesting we use fund balance? Fund balance after we re-roof. So yeah, we'll find the money. But the mayor's exactly correct. It's a very rough surface. So hopefully again next year we can have it done, Mayor.
Yes, we're well aware. We also need to do the planting. We know about that.
Pardon me? The
We'll do the planting as soon
as
as the paving is done.
And then Bob, also, one of the things that you've been using a lot of is Carmel Cares. They've been doing a lot of projects here. Do you have anything that monetizes what they've contributed?
Yes, well, a few months ago, we do an annual report to council. It lists all the things that they've purchased, material supplies, labor, volunteer hours. So we do an annual report. It was just a few months ago that identified, off the top of my head, it was like $189,000 of the equivalent goods and services and 6,000 people hours of volunteer time.
Might be nice to have that in the report at some point.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, anybody have questions? We'll open it up to the public. So this time we're going to allow public testimony. But I'm not going to be quite as draconian as I am normally. We can go ahead and use it as long as you like, as long as you don't overdo it. But let's try to get the public up. Where's Karen? Karen, I'm sorry, did you have any questions during the public? Karen, did you have any questions?
No, thank you, not at this time.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one sec. Okay, I'm just going to get started because we're.
IT, can we show the, oh, did it go away?
Hi, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Amy Herzog. This is Jeff Burkhart. We're here on behalf of Visit Carmel, and we'd like to again thank you for considering your investment and having Visit Carmel continue to manage the destination marketing program on behalf of the city. As you're aware, The proposed city budget suggests continuing at $120,000, which is the same amount that the city has invested for several years, for many years, except for 1 year during the pandemic where it went down briefly. And we thought we'd, for you, outline 3 primary reasons why the city of Carmel is integrated into the overall destination marketing. It goes without saying, tourism revenue is absolutely critical to the city's economy. And the city's investment in marketing comes back, indeed, as earned TOT and added sales tax revenue from that increased visitor spending. And the second reason is Carmel-by-the-Sea is a world-renowned tourism destination, and the city absolutely needs to be a part of these marketing decisions. And the city's investment is a partnership, which also provides a seat on Visit Carmel's board and allows a much more active engagement in our marketing direction.
And number 3, Carmel's official tourism website is a free marketing tool to all visitor-serving businesses. We showcase this destination not only from the website, but across all the marketing. But what's really interesting, and you guys may not know this, is that when we first launched the official travel site for Carmel, we integrated in the business license number and SIC code of each of these businesses for their login, and they get a microsite and other free tools that we then support to help each of these visitor-serving businesses that currently benefit from your investment. For instance, art galleries, retailers, performing arts, and more aren't putting in any money aside from their own tax and so forth. And so your investment allows us to provide them with expanded services in the way of a microsite and some other support. And they each can log in and make changes, and we're there to help support them. And over and beyond the businesses benefiting from your investment is we are really robust in web content with the history and heritage, from a history timeline, fun facts, and so forth. And as well, of course, our events bring a lot of attention, both visitors and locals, and we showcase all those events on the website. And as well, we carry the web content where needed into collateral pieces that get distributed to the hotels throughout town and beyond. The Carmel-by-the-Sea Car Week event, as we're calling it now, as the city curates those events. And then we've really gotten behind the Carmel Art Walk and the art galleries, and we've then launched Meet the Makers, and there's a number of areas where we're servicing those businesses. Our sort of key collateral piece is the official visitor's guide, over and above showcasing the destination. It also has a historic walking tour, so that heritage is in there as well.
Right, and as you're aware, recently we've really greatly enhanced our destination stewardship program with a much stronger emphasis on responsible travel. And that expanded content not only highlights our volunteer groups, but also helps inform the visitor about how they can get involved in caring for our village as well. And we consider this added element to our marketing to be absolutely foundational and underlying all of our marketing decisions. It's really a priority for us, and it's also what visitors come to expect from a world-renowned destination such as ours. And finally, the city's investment is leveraging into a very robust and fully comprehensive marketing plan. And there are incredible efficiencies in working together to promote our village, and it's also a really important way to have cohesiveness among all of the various entities that make up our marketing program. And this is evidenced by the city's own website's link to our visitor website. This is truly a real partnership, and we're a team, and it's a mutually beneficial partnership, and we very much value your continued investment in what we are doing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Do you want
Anybody
us
else
to stay for
wishing?
questions or no?
Sorry, what?
I was just going to say for questions if you wanted us to, but if not, we'll sit.
I don't see any.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Council members, for this moment to public comment. My name is Alyssa Rendon. I'm with C Monterey, formerly the Monterey County Convention and Visitors Bureau. You do receive a 2 reports from us a year, kind of outlining the return on investment into our countywide destination marketing organization. But I'm going to throw a couple numbers out while I have the floor. Obviously not all the numbers because I don't have enough time, but I did want to point out our group business development program has generated over $470,000 in economic impact just year to date. So that's in booked group meetings, conferences, just here in Carmel-by-the-Sea. Our social media campaigns have leveraged over 44,000 partner site conversions. So that's a click from our website, Sea Monterey, to a direct business here in Carmel-by-the-Sea. So we have over 262,000 followers across all of our different social channels, but we don't want them to stay on our website. We want them to reach a Carmel-by-the-Sea business. And then another number I wanted to throw out was over $400,000 in ad equivalency. So that's positive public relations. You might have seen some articles in New York Times, Vogue, San Francisco Magazine, just to name a few. So we don't work in silos. We work really closely with Visit Carmel as well as Sunset Center, the Chamber of Commerce, and even the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, specifically in times of crisis when our hotels offer special rates for residents displaced by storms or road closures, and during Car Week. So we try to be not only the best resource we can for visitors, but also for our residents for those countywide events. We organize a media roundtable, but just act as that kind of traffic. Maybe it's where to go or where to avoid during Car Week. And speaking of residents, I had sent all of you a resident sentiment survey that we're trying to shape up. So I ask if you haven't already, please take it, please share it with your constituents. We're going to use that to help shape our strategic roadmap update that we'll present in September. So with that, I just want to thank you for your continued investment, partnership, and for your time this evening.
Thank you, appreciate it. Sure.
Can I make a comment too? I really want to say I appreciate all the stuff that CVB or Sea Monterey does during the times of crisis and emergency. You guys are really our go-to for us, between you and Big Sir Kate, I think. We really appreciate it, so thank you.
Anybody else? You don't see anybody does anybody else want to testify?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Joaquin Turner. I'm a local artist and gallery owner here in Carmel, and I'm the organizer of the Carmel Art Walk, and I'm here on behalf of all the artist-owned galleries that participate in the walk, including the Carmel Art Association, which is a co-op, so technically artist-owned. I've had the pleasure of working with Amy and Jeff on a number of projects that have been beneficial to the community, and that's Amy and Jeff of Visit Carmel. I started the Art Walk about 8 years ago, and it's something I was managing on my own. For years I was financing everything myself, and having to play debt collector with all the other participating galleries every time we had an expenditure, and often not getting fully reimbursed. So we received no funding from the city or anyone else, so there was no other way really to do it. And over time it became hard for me to juggle my artwork and my business as an artist and gallery owner. Thankfully, Visit Carmel got involved. Without their help, it's likely that the Art Walk would have stopped running. But with their support, it has grown and continues to be a very successful monthly event. And it brings a lot of visitors. It's a special Art Walk because visitors can meet and mingle with the artists and with the artists themselves and build real relationships. We also share the rich history and artistic legacy of Carmel with their visitors. And since the city doesn't really have a history and art museum, we help fill that gap by educating folks on why Carmel is Carmel. Visit Carmel is also instrumental in making the Meet the Makers event such a huge success. It pretty much sells out every year and is a great way to promote locally made wine, beer, craft food, and art. And it couldn't happen without Visit Carmel. The local artists also really appreciate being highlighted on the Carmel destination site, and their choice to highlight Carmel's artistic heritage is also very important to us. So I know that's pretty much my time, but we just want to let you know that we really appreciate what Visit Carmel has done and continues to do for us. So thank you.
Joaquin, appreciate it.
And can I just say congratulations on your first place win at the Plein Air Art Festival last weekend? It's awesome. Good work.
Indeed. Yes. Nancy Toomey, thank you all for what all you do and the work that goes into this budget process. It's not my favorite thing in all of my past years working in some similar capacities in business. I'd like to call out and recognize the appreciation of my call out that came at least in my message, maybe in others, on the extraordinary funding line item. And I've mentioned this in 3 or 4 other prior public meetings as a need for more community education on what extraordinary funding might be. What are the options? What are the timelines? What do they look like? And I continue to get the same response as was represented this evening, and I'm feeling like that's inadequate. And you know, that's an opinion, and I know you've got some short-term decisions that don't necessarily impact in between now and June for this budget approval, but I would really like to see some education, some guidance, some pointers to information on how we as citizens can better understand extraordinary funding options that a community like ours can go about, knowing that we have no clue what the dollar amount is. I get that, and I've said that before, but we are going to need extraordinary funding for something like the police station, for other potential projects. And I'd like to see that as citizens we can get more informed on what that path can be. So consider that a pushback. Thank you very much.
Nancy, appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Tim Toomey. Just wanted to put the challenge out there, like you've heard from several other people that have written in about continuing to look at, cost reduction opportunities. And I know you've done that in preparation for this budget, but I would just ask you to continue to challenge your department managers to come up with ideas, looking at other cities, whatever, even if, we don't compare expense-wise to them, there might be nuances within those cities, that will give us some ideas, some learnings. One thing that did catch my eye in the budget was the money that's expended for the courier messenger service for the mail delivery. And thank you to the finance folks that clarified that for us. There's a chart that they provided, and it's interesting. It's $86,000 a year, $86,600 for this year. And I was curious as to whether it was, more people taking advantage of that service or the cost or whatever. And it turns out that it's the cost per delivery. It's gone from, in the last 3 years, it's gone from 40 some odd dollars to 80. It's almost doubled in the last 2 years. And the recipients of that service have gone down significantly. So that's something I think we really need to take a look at. I mean, it's kind of an unintended consequence of not having mail delivery. But that said, maybe there's an opportunity for volunteer efforts in that. Mail on wheels, like Meals on Wheels, I don't know. But, there are a lot of, volunteer people that would volunteer for things like that, and maybe, trying to hook up with Carmel Foundation or some other a nonprofit organization might help reduce those costs. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Don't be shy.
We did get some, just Ms. Bowman's in the front. We did receive correspondence, and everything that we got obviously was sent out to council. So if any of you wrote letters, love letters, please rest assured the council received them.
Okay, so that is why I came tonight. I did have the opportunity. Our board meeting ended a little early, but I am off to an event at the Sunset Center. But I did want to let you know that we sent in an update on our endowment report based on some of the requests from last council meeting. So again, I just want to thank you for your support, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else? Melanie Bueller.
Good evening, council and staff. Good to see all of you. I'm really pleased that you talked about the fund balance and so forth, because I just want to say one thing. The people in this community, there's a very large number of people in the community who are extremely concerned about this year's budget. They were concerned about last year's budget, and I think understanding the fund balance is extremely important, and I really appreciated that. Maybe there's some way that you could do that in the Friday letter, Chip. I think it would be helpful, because as you have reemphasized, staff, we don't know what the next few years are going to hold for us, just like we didn't ever anticipate what happened in 2020 with the pandemic and everything. But there's a really serious, I think, community concern about where we're going with the budgets and how we're going to keep ourselves afloat. And so the issue of, control and projection, prioritization are extremely important. Things like, for instance, just in the capital improvements program, everything should be geared to what is the priority? What are those projects that absolutely the department heads need to see done within a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, especially getting to 5 years, a 5-year program of how we're going to address our drainage needs, our street needs, all of our needs, because it seems to me, and I'm not going to pick out particular projects or people, but it seems like there are a number of projects that do not, at this point in time, need to be in a top priority position. And that there are greater, like, drainage needs, erosion control, beach, you name it, things that are much more important. And those should be the ones that are right on the top of the list. We all know that the police department and public works, they're so overdue that I don't even know what priority you'd put them. It's in the stratosphere. So can we please concentrate on those kinds of issues instead of so much of these smaller projects, and less Bob and Brandon think they're exceedingly important and have, for some special reason, need to be done right now. There's a sense, and it's my sense too, that there are things that really stand out, and they should be taken care of like yesterday. Another thing I just wanted to ask, if Mr. Mayor, I could have a couple more seconds.
Of course, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That we really need to concentrate on our capital improvements program is not a wish list. And that has to be really explained and thought through by council members and staff. It's not something for a grab bag for all kinds of things to be done that people might think need to be done, but they're really not top line public safety and health issues. And so I would just urge you all to make an extra effort to prioritize what you're doing in the CIP and in the budget too. And then one comment, because it is so important in the budget, is our staffing needs. Staffing expenses are just so out of whack these days. And compared to other cities, we're a small city, but we have all of these tourists, and they take up a lot of expense and time for staff. But I think because of the cost of employees, that we really have to see what we can do with less. And so that means I'm very concerned about hiring new employees. I mean, you cut back on the police department, but that was a good thing. You saved a lot of money there, but now you're making up for it with all the overtime and additional expenses. Sometimes that's not what we should be doing. And I appreciate, Chip, that you said that, you know, we're going to relook at this, because we're talking about an awful lot of money. And then I would just like to ask for you to forecast where we're going to, and this is in line with what the Toomey said, forecast for us where in the heck we are going to get money. I'm not talking about, you know, $1 million from TOT. We're talking about we need a lot more than that. I mean, we need a huge amount of money for what we need to do. And the TOT isn't going to do it. And so a lot of us want to know how we're going to keep the city at the same standard that we have today, but we have no concept of where you think we're going to get the money to do this. And so I will close with that. Thank you for working so hard to put all of this together, staff. And it's not meant as a criticism, it's just meant, it's leveled out of a very deep concern for how we're going to move forward in the next number of years and still get the very necessities done in a way that this community is used to. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Melanie. Appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody in Zoom? Do we have anybody in Zoom today?
Yes, Amrish, go ahead.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, city manager, and staff. My name is Amrish Patel. I'm speaking as both owner of Carmel Green Lantern Inn and also the chair of Sea Monterey. Thank you for your investment in Sea Monterey. Our vision is centered on driving economic vitality and supporting quality of life for residents. Our mission is to do this responsibly. While Sea Monterey programs are critical to all the hospitality businesses, they are crucially important to the smaller businesses. As a small business owner, we don't have the budget, resources, time, or expertise to do the marketing. That's what Sea Monterey does for us. It's extremely important and vital for us. Without that, we would struggle to survive. Together with Visit Carmel and Monterey Regional Airport, we help secure the Minneapolis flight, a part of our strategy to bring visitors from further away that stay longer, spend more, and equally important, don't bring their cars. Although tourism spend is up from last year, we still have a long way to go to be back to the pre-pandemic numbers. Competition is fierce, and with the collective jurisdiction investments, along with the TID, it provides us an opportunity to compete with destinations that have much bigger resources and budget than us, such as Sonoma, Napa, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo. I really want to thank you for your continued support and investment in Sea Monterey. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Amrish. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Dale Byrne, go ahead. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Dale.
Dale.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Thank you. Administrator Rarig, Assistant Administrator Swanson, Mayor Potter, and City Council. First, I'd like to thank Assistant Administrator Swanson and his staff for the effort put into this year's budget process and Brandon's professional presentation of the recommendations. I was very disappointed, however, to see staff recommending turning down the county's offer to pay for expenses related to the road repairs at the Carpenter and Ocean entrances to the city. Reason after reason was given for not doing this project. The excuse for not taking care of this critical roadway, which is currently making Carmel look like a third world country, is paperwork and other projected reasons. But the basic premise is it's too much work for staff. The county is saying they will pay for their share of the project. I have seen all the back and forth communications involved in volunteer John Comer starting this process, and he kept it going despite being told multiple times that it wouldn't happen. I have personally been subject to this same kind of thinking. The first answer to most requests is no, and that's probably typical of city government. It's too much work. Bob Harari, who's the city gatekeeper for Carmel Cares, gave a talk at Carmel Cares' first anniversary celebration. He said that when we tell Dale no, he hears on. By thinking yes instead of no, we have working with our city partners, developed novel business models which allowed us to get things done time and time again, and in the process, transform much of the village's open spaces with significant safety improvements and beautification projects. I challenge this council to think yes to transforming the entrance to our city now instead of waiting at least 3 years for the county to do it, if then. The additional weight of the increasing number of electric vehicles and the increasing volume of heavy construction-related trucks with the accelerated rate of large construction projects in the village will wreak havoc on those crumbling roads in that time. Thanks to John's efforts, the county has offered us the ability to take control of our own destiny. He has even offered to assist the city in filling out the paperwork, worked with the county to get samples of completed paperwork from other similar projects, and I'm sure is continuing to investigate why this project should be done and not why it shouldn't be done. It's rather astounding to me that we would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in significant staff time on projects that will have no real effect on our primary asset, Carmel Beach, or the vast majority of the village that visitors see, but turn down something this critical at such a low cost. We pay millions to Google and videos showing the beauty of our village to get people to come here, but the first thing people see when they arrive is potholes and weeds. I'm sure that none of us let visitors to our house stumble over potholes and weeds to get to our front door. I also find it surprising since all of our city leadership and 98% of our staff drive by and see this nightmare every single morning on their way to work in our community. On a related area, for 5 years, I have been suggesting and have even made samples of welcome signage as you enter the city, but have also been turned down or ignored. So instead, we have nothing at Carpenter and Ocean, and a small sign that references 2016 at Rio. I would like to thank John Comer for his patient persistence and suggest this low-cost and highly valuable project get the attention it deserves. I'd also thank you for that, and I'd also like to, I sent in a document, and I'm sure you all saw it, but I just want to point out a couple points. One of the challenges I have with the budget is we don't get to see drill down into line items like landscaping expense, and unfortunately, Carmel Cares is in the weeds, literally and figuratively. So I just want to make sure, because there are some things that are really working well in this town, in fact, a lot of them. And I think we've seen the great work that's been done in the budget. However, last year, I thank the council for approving $28,000 in expenses for the scenic pathway landscaping expenses. I'm not going to go into all the details of what I said in here, but that's highly leveraged money because it's very closely managed, and you have volunteers that add on to the effectiveness of it. We want to make sure that if you want to continue that level of detail, that we suggest that you allocate $30,000. And maybe it's been done, but we can't see that it's done. I just want to remind you to try to make sure that happens. The same thing with the scenic pathway project funds for hardscape. I think Shirley and I have made pitches the last meeting the last 2 years, and we thank you for coming up with the budget money at the last second, and it's been highly successful. The projects have been, I think, really well done. We are going to go through the last of the money, according to Tom Ford and me, in our analysis on the project that was just approved by Forest and Beach about August. So the 80+ thousand that's still sitting in the city side and our money that's sitting there is going to be expended. The challenge, and we have talked with Brandon, and we're thinking of just leaving it for the mid-year budget review. The challenge with that is in the past, it's been a 50-50 public-private partnership, and there's no way that we're going to be able to do fundraising based on the city kicking in money. You know, it's just a good way to raise funds, a challenge grant, you might say. If we wait 6 months and then that happens, we're not going to be able to match the funds anymore. So, and that's okay. It's just those projects won't be done to the level that we've been doing them. Just want to point that out. Finally, and this is a new thing, and I've talked to Brandon and also Bob in our biweekly meetings. A local businessman has come up with a novel idea of a 50-50 partnership to do downtown sidewalk pressure washing, so we make sure our city is beautiful all the time. And it's detailed in here. I don't know where that stands, if there's even any possibility of doing that. I'd hate to miss that opportunity since we've got a pretty good definition of it, and we have the vendors worked out, and we're willing to put in a lot of time and effort to make that happen. There are also a couple vehicles that Carmel Cares thinks we need. We see a lot of things that maybe aren't normally seen because we're on the ground working all the time. A utility tractor to make sure we're properly maintaining the beach. We also don't see any money at all for repairing that ramp, and I know that our first responders are very concerned about that, because if somebody has a heart attack on the beach right now, they really have no way to get somebody up without, banging them around trying to get up the hill and maybe do more damage to them than their heart attack might have done. So that's a concern. But utility tractor and water vehicle, and Carmel Cares is very willing, as we did with the $50,000 donation for the new ambulance, doing some kind of a fundraising effort to raise funds for those. I'm not suggesting that the city put money into their budget, but I think we could actually do something. Friends of Carmel Forest, Carmel Cares, and the city are planting lots of trees, and there's no way we're going to be able to water them with what we have. So just wanted to point those things out, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Nova.
Kelly, go ahead.
Kelly, the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Administration, and staff. I have had the great pleasure of serving on the Forest and Beach Commission the past 2 years, and as you're aware, we are in the midst of an urban forest master plan update. Davie Resources Group has been working with us in the city to accomplish that. And this is the state of our forest in town is actually a place where we do have excellent data around what the deferred maintenance and maintenance needs are. And I think if you look at the tree inventory that the Davie Resources Group has put together, they have identified, I think that we have over 11,000 trees. 1,000 of them are in either dead, very poor or poor condition, 5,000 are in fair condition, and 5,000 are in good condition. And those city trees are all identified in our tree database now, and in need of repair. I saw in the budget that the forestry budget had been increased this year as part of the proposed 3-year catch-up maintenance plan. I just wanted to make sure that the City Council was aware that the 3-year catch-up plan only addresses the nearly 400 dead and very poor trees and 800 stumps. And that's at a cost of $3.6 million, which if divided by 3 is $1.2 million per year for the 3-year catch-up plan. So, but in addition to the 3-year catch-up plan, the city presently requires $500,000 to $700,000 per year just in routine maintenance, and to cover the 5,000 fair trees and pruning on the 5,000 good trees that we have in our city. So I'm happy I had a chance to meet with Tom Ford and Justin Ono yesterday to go through the tree inventory and the budget and the catch-up plan they had put together. And it was clear that the budget that has been proposed for forestry next year is only 1/3 of the catch-up plan and does not include the ongoing regular maintenance budget that would be required of between $500,000 and $700,000 a year just to maintain their regular routine maintenance. So with all the data we have, I know we'll be presenting to City Council in July the results of our community survey, which were outstanding, and the status of the tree inventory from the Davie Resource Group. And we have a meeting tomorrow. We're expecting strong participation from our community on our next community outreach on the Urban Forest Master Plan. But I guess it's just a wonder if whether or not our $3.6 million 3-year catch-up would be eligible for consideration for the fund balance, and still spread it over 3 years, because that is a one-off kind of catch-up, and that we keep the forestry budget on an ongoing basis at the routine support levels that the city requires. I just feel like I just want to make sure everybody understands that the 1.2 million being proposed is a third of the catch-up, doesn't presently include maintaining the regular maintenance. We also know that for these 1,000 trees that are in poor, very poor and dead condition, that when they fall, particularly on private property, that the cost to remove them is 2 to 3 times what's proposed in the catch-up budget, not to mention the claims that the city receives, often from insurance companies, right? The number of emails that are sitting in our city staff email boxes related to claims that takes 2 to 3 hours to respond to every email from the city attorney looking up old records about trees and branches and when they fell. It takes a significant amount of time of our city staff to be addressing those. So the sooner we can get a catch-up plan in place that's robust and actually working, I also think our resident community will be very supportive of us coming back with a catch-up plan, because when you see the community survey results in July, you'll see that there is a very strong message within our community, a strong interest in our city helping us get caught up on some of the deferred maintenance within our forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Phone, excuse me. Phone number ending in 941.
Hi, Mayor Potter and City Council members. This is Christy Hollenbeck. I am not an expert on budgets, but I do understand we need to be fiscally responsible. We need to focus on needs versus wants. I wholeheartedly agree with Planning Commissioner Bob Delves' quote from this week's Pine Cone. He said, "The single most important function of elected officials is not to approve an annual budget, but to own it, to understand it from top to bottom by having challenged staff throughout the annual budgeting process. We need a city council with a financial acumen to deliver fiscal discipline." Commissioner Delves also said, "Good leaders are always prepared and share the whole story and provide in-depth rationale for their decisions." As a resident, I would like to see our roads and buildings and trees be better maintained. Dead trees are a hazard and should be removed. A $40 million annual budget for a tiny 1 mile square town is a lot of money. Keeping the downtown pristine will eventually lead to increased revenue for the city. I know Dale Byrne, with the help of many hardworking volunteers from Carmel Cares, Kelly Burke, Shirley Moon, and others, they've been reaching out to the business community to help beautify the commercial district. They've been adding flower boxes and keeping the downtown litter free. I do not think it's prudent to hire new employees for the next couple of years. Carmel should significantly minimize or end the use of outside consultants. They are extremely expensive, and do not understand our unique town. A 10% across the board cut may be necessary, and many very smart business people I've spoken to in our town believe we should stop pensions with any new hires, and retirement programs, 401ks, et cetera, should be implemented instead. They also say that the pensions we have on the books may already be bankrupt or seriously harm the city at some point in time. The reduced policing model that you mentioned sounds a bit worrying and unsustainable. Okay, thank you. That was all my stuff in a nutshell. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anybody else? Nova?
Yes, Shirley Moon, go ahead.
Shirley, welcome.
Shirley, go ahead.
Shirley, the floor is yours.
Can you remind her how to unmute?
She's already unmuted, it looks like. Yeah.
Shirley. Well, Shirley, I don't want to be rude, but if you're not speaking.
No, there's no one else.
Shirley? Oh, Shirley, if you don't have a chance, I guess we could go ahead and bring it back to council then for discussion, but if you wanted to chime in later, we could let you. All right. Sorry, Shirley. Okay, so we'll bring it back to council for some discussion and direction. One of the things, we had some questions from the public, Chip.
There were it was great comments. Thank you so much to the public. You know, Mrs. Toomey talked about extraordinary funding, and I think that's something we can definitely do. But Mr. Barron had a homework, one of his homework assignment questions was for me to compare and contrast certain grants. So, for example, we got a $500,000 Coastal Commission grant for the beach. And with that came $100,000 that we can use for staffing, for our own staff, to pay for our staff, which is great. And the reporting requirements seem to be pretty reasonable. And it's, you know, it's a $500,000 grant. It's a lot of money. In contrast, we got a CAL FIRE grant for some work in the preserve. And what is that, Bob? It was $150,000, and it's exponentially more reporting work. Now, you know, if we were Yolo County and we got $10 million, clearly we could carve off enough staff time to do the reporting requirements. But, you know, Bob's staff has spent literally probably hundreds of hours, and we were just offered, if we finish one more step, $66,000. So one of the things that we want to talk about is, where's there a threshold below which it's unfortunately not worth it? So those are the kinds of things that I want to explore with the public, and specifically Mrs. Toomey, because she asked about it, Council. Mr. Toomey asked about courier service, and yeah, the prices are going up. The council has a policy that will pay for people who are physically unable to get to the post office, and yeah, that is a rising cost, even in spite of the fact that the numbers are going down. Thank you, Mrs. Billig, for your compliment on our fund balance explanation. Yeah, the more we can broadcast this, the more we can, the more we certainly will. And we do have a compliment to Jane, so we did receive a confirmation that we'll have a finance manager perhaps as early as June 1st. So Jane will have a partner in crime to work on these things. You know, a lot of the CIP is really built around 3 pillars. Those are public health, public safety, and essential maintenance. So again, but that's a pretty broad term, right? So someone could say, well, paving the streets, Chip, that's you know, that's necessary. That's essential maintenance, and if they're not paved, they're not safe, and those kinds of things. So that's been our moniker for the last several years, even pre-pandemic. So that'll continue to be again our focus. And Mrs. Hollenbeck just talked about, you know, roads, trees, buildings, and you know, better maintenance. And you know, what we have to weigh, I think, Council, is we don't have the capacity in-house to provide every level of service. We're not going to hire an architect to work on one job and then cut them loose. So there is the dependency to hire consultants, so people that can do things for us, and then they leave and we don't own them. We don't own the liability. I used that term earlier, the liability of long-term pension and insurance and benefits and the like when they're done with the project. And we also use contractors, and that's kind of a, you know, with no disrespect, you know, neck down, people who are actually working the tools and doing the labor. And again, it's the same measure. We can hire a weed abatement contracting firm, and they can do a lot of work versus us hiring multiple staff to do the same amount of work, perhaps stretched over a little bit of time. So again, those are as an answer. We just want to balance those. Mr. Dramoff and I Councilmember Dramoff and I talked last week about kind of the number of revenue sources that we really have. We could do a parcel tax. Not too popular. We have a sales tax that has about 15 years left on it, Jane, 14 years. We could do a real property transfer tax if we became a charter city, and Mr. Pierrick, our city attorney, is working with Councilmember Richards on that. We're not allowed to do a construction truck impact fee, unfortunately. That's unconstitutional in California. And then we have the pesky paid parking. And then the TO&T increase, which the council decided we're going to wait on for some time. So I think those are the ones that Councilmember Dramoff and I talked about. So those will continue to be in our quiver, and we'll look for more, certainly. Mr. Byrne, asked about Ocean Avenue, and I agree that I think all the entrances to the city, Rio, through the Pebble Gate, quite frankly, coming down Camino del Monte, Carpenter, and Ocean, and all the little side streets as well, are pretty much a mess. You can tell where the city begins because the pavement improves. And when we're talking about capacity, I think it's a great project. We're not saying never. This is on the county, it's entirely in the county, the portion of the pavement. None of it's in the city. I think that waiting a year and then retilting against this to see if we can get some projects that are core to the city done will be beneficial. The way we're doing that, we're reacting to your direction, which is we're hiring a second project manager. Well, that's our proposal. If you approve it, we'll hire a second project manager. But even with that second body, they can only do 8 to 10 projects a year. So you have to weigh those, council. The ones that can wait, I think someone said it, they're all good projects. I mean, they really are. We don't have a lot of pet projects. Some cities do. Some cities have a neighborhood that has a particular pet project. We don't. These are really kind of citywide projects, and they benefit the common good, everyone in the village and our visitors. Thank you to the Forest and Beach Commissioner. Again, she'll be presenting tomorrow night, Kelly, at the public meeting regarding the forest management plan, where we talk about tree species. She'll be talking about the survey results. So, again, we are investing as much as we can in the trees that have resulted in not enough maintenance in the past. It's nice to see Dr. Filito in the kitchen, council member. We didn't hear from Ms. Moon. Again, Ms. Hollenbeck talked about needs versus wants. I think that's what we're focused on. I think we really are focused on needs versus wants. In fact, next week, Chief Tomasi and one of his sergeants will be presenting to the police department ad hoc on really what the needs of a contemporary police department are. Again, as we've often said, we don't need a Ferrari. We need a Honda Accord, or we need the basics of a contemporary police department. And I don't think we're gilding any of these capital projects. I think they really are basic, built-up deferred maintenance. And again, our deferred maintenance estimate probably exceeds $80 million. A lot of the things you can't see, right? No one ever calls and say, my stormwater is flowing really well, Chip, or my toilet flushed, or those are not compliments that we hear because you don't see those things. So, but they're all maintenance. So Ms. Hollenbeck is exactly correct on that. So I hope I tried to touch on a little bit of everything, Mayor. If there's a question that I didn't answer, I'm happy to try to do so.
I have a quick question. To Ms. Toomey's point, what about a bond? What about bonding? And how does that look? Do you think it would be possible for us to have an expert in that field come and give a quick presentation
100%.
on what it's like to bond, what it looks like, how much it is, how long they can go out?
Yep, absolutely. And we have a lease obligation bond for a revolving lease obligation bond for Sunset Center. And Jane, what does that have? 7 years left on it. We retired the debt service on our pension liability bond last year, so we made the last payment on that. So we have a lot of ability, and again, Councilmember Dramoff, we have a lot of ability to bond more, to finance more. We've got we got the best Moody's bond rating available to a local jurisdiction. We've not tipped our hand on the PD project yet because we don't know what the project is. But again, we have the potential to look for bond financing for that. So yes, sir, we can do that. We've got some great partners we've worked in the past, and we can have a public meeting, just a Q&A to talk about what we can do and what we can't do.
Okay, so now, did I see Shirley Moon? Do you have your hand back up again for a moment? Do you want to speak? There she is. Shirley.
Shirley, do you want to unmute yourself? Go ahead.
Hi, I don't know what happened. Something dropped, but I'm apologizing. I have no idea what happened. What I was really trying to say is that about 4 years ago, the city was poised to spend a significant amount of money on the pathway, and it seems like we've sort of lost that momentum, and I realize what challenges you have before you. But there was a quote in the proposal that there was some kind of a trust fund set up, $230,000 from Measure D for the combined project, and that this amount was never intended to renovate the entire 6/10 of a pathway. It was a budget set for the initial landscaping and barrier repair project only. So that's $362,899 that was poised to be spent, and it was basically 133,000 of it was for a one-block experiment or a pilot project. Well, Carmel Cares has taken the entire 6/10 of a mile as a pilot project, and we hold pop-up events every Wednesday morning to see how people like what we're doing. There's no consultant fees. So there's 132,000 that I think we should have back for our project. What Bob said about the approval from the Forest and Beach is correct, but it was casually mentioned about the DG pathway. Well, it's a huge expense to do the DG pathway. We're not going to be able to approach that, and we should approach it. But things, as Mayor Potter well knows, you can save a lot of money by doing construction in an efficient manner. And we're not able to do that when we're piecemealed money. You've got an opportunity to leverage a huge amount of volunteer effort, and it won't last forever, but if you can give us the money, we'll finish that project. It's going to be a showcase, and you will spend a third of what you would be spending with consultants and engineers, and it will still be a very simple, elegant Carmel pathway that this community and visitors to this community deserve. Thank you for your consideration.
Shirley, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Is there anybody else? Okay. All right, we'll bring it back to council. So, council, we were asked to give some direction on the 4 possible determinations here of do we want to keep them in the project or the process or not. One is the Doolittle pathway realignment of the bridge. Do you have any thoughts on this?
And my recommendation is just to delay them a year, Mr. Mayor, until we build some capacity. One of the if I may, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the ways we glean fund balance is we budget for the positions that we're recommending for the entire fiscal year. Well, they're not going to arrive on July 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year. It could take 3 or 4 months to hire some of these positions. So during that time, we have a savings, right, in that expenditure, and that goes to fund balance. So hopefully we can get a project manager. Brandon and Marissa and I will work on how we prioritize those positions. Public safety always comes first, and then look at filling them so we can, follow your directions in the most expeditious way.
Karen, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was unable to be there for the field trip today, but I did want to point out that the money for the construction, $150,000, I think is way too high. The Friends of Mission Trail Nature Preserve have sought and received grant money from the Carmel Rotary to construct a bridge and have done extensive looking at what materials might be needed, and it's far less than the amount that's listed there. I think the majority of the funding is for permitting, as I understand. I would like to point out that that area is a safety issue, which I'm sure you saw today. I myself have seen a young woman and her toddler and a baby fall when it's slippery in the winter. And it was wonderful to get rid of the tank and the pump house. But if you noticed on the end of the trail, as people use it, that trail gets eroded, and then there's a lip created by that concrete swale. So I do think this is a health and safety issue. I'm happy that you are not recommending it going away completely, because it does need to be done. It is that number 4 drainage project. So I did want to point out, though, that the Friends of Mission Trail have pledged to raise part of those funds for the actual construction. And I believe that's to provide the materials for it. So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, we have groups like Carmel Cares, we have groups like Friends of the Forest and Friends of Mission Trail, who are dedicated to helping the city raise funds and also create good projects. And I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Mr. Mayor, the council member is exactly correct. It's not so much the bridge. I would estimate that the permitting, and it's Army Corps, Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, fill in the blank. There's so many permits that we have to get, as well as the monitoring, because that is a sensitive habitat area. I would estimate they will far exceed the actual construction costs for that bridge. But the council member is exactly correct, Mr. Mayor.
Council members, your concerns?
I would favor putting it off, at least for a year or so.
Yeah, I would agree. I understand what Councilmember Ferlito is saying about the risk, but I don't feel it is imperative that we do that right away. And one of the other things that I look at when I'm looking at these is the long-term damage, such as the dry rot or something like that that could lead to other damage. And I think this is pretty stagnant damage, so I would vote to put this one off.
Jeff?
Yeah, I would tend to agree when I look down the list of sort of excuse me, equivalent planning projects. You know, there's the Doolittle Bridge in the Mission Trail Nature Preserve. There's the drainage system design, which we're talking about putting off too. And then there are the 2 projects that we're not talking about putting off. The shoreline repairs, you know, the 2 shoreline repairs project, one for the 2 flights of stairs at I think 10th and 12th, and the other for the 4th Avenue outfall design, which is literally going to crumble someday in front of all of us. I think that staff is I agree with staff's analysis in terms of which 2 to put off, which two to keep, and which 2 to put off for a year. It pains me to, you know, like I know Karen is close to Councilmember Ferlito is close to the Mission Trail Nature Preserve project, and it pains me to put that off. And, you know, as I'm the biggest advocate of the drainage system. I think Melanie talked about the drainage system, and, you know, that putting off the drainage design on that Unipero bypass will basically set that whole project back by a year. And you know, here we are. You know, Melanie talked about funding sources, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I think that staff has made the sort of right decision in terms of where to draw the line. So right now, I agree with you know, that project and the other 3.
To defer, sir.
To defer the Doolittle Bridge, and, you know, I'm less copacetic with deferring the drainage, but because, you know, that's always close to my heart. But
you're first on that. Thank you for loving the drainage system.
Well, so I agree with the proposal here. I do not agree, though, that we should just go ahead and completely throw away the Ocean Avenue Highway 1 Carpenter project, because I think that it's become unnecessarily complicated. I think what we could do is, I'm happy to go ahead and be the liaison between the county, having worked over there for a little while, and also Caltrans. I know Caltrans very well. I'm also vice chair of the Transportation Commission. I'd like to go ahead and be able to go ahead and use my clout over there to go ahead and start the discussions. Just start the discussions. Now, I'll do it myself, and they take Bob with me. But I'd like to go ahead and have the sessions discussed so I can get a better understanding of what the real complexities are. It seems to me it's been made unnecessarily complicated.
Yes, sir.
With council direction.
Well, to that point, I mean, you could continue you could start the discussion and use everything that we've heard today, and we could still take it off the project and take it off the budget list. Is that not right? Like, I don't, like, my question would be, what would staff's commitment be?
Well, I think that what the mayor's, and he didn't talk to me ahead of time, but, you know, I think that, you know, through Bob and the mayor talking to the county and Caltrans, we can get a better sense for whether it's, 500 hours of the city staff capacity or 2,000. Yeah, whatever it is, it remains to be seen. So, you know, if you want to allow the mayor to proceed with that kind of a research, you don't have to make a decision on it tonight. We can come back in a couple months after we get a sense for what that really is.
I would be, okay with that. I worry, we talk, and we talk a lot about, staff resources and whatnot. And I see, we've sort of, I guess we're poised to give you the authority to hire another project manager, which will hopefully get some of these $10 million worth of projects that sort of accumulated over the years off the books. But, what I see, like I spoke before, there's the drainage project, which, is going to suffer because we don't have staff resources to do that. So I'm okay with, sort of proceeding down that way.
Exploratory pathway.
Yeah.
Okay. Karen, you got your hand up.
Yes. I got to make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. I'm concerned with how our village looks as you come in off of Carpenter as well as off of Ocean. I think that is something that the Northwoods neighborhood used to help clean up the area coming off of Carpenter, and that hasn't been done quite as often. That was very generous of them. I am concerned that $500,000 might be a drop in the bucket on that project. So, Mayor, if you want to pursue and see what you could find out with the county, what I wouldn't want to do is pledge to do this and then find out when we open up the roadway or whatever that it's a lot more extensive and we don't have a real agreement with the county about who's going to cover the overages if that happens. So that is very much a concern of mine. As far as the drainage projects, particularly the Junipero bypass and so on, I'm very concerned that if we defer too many drainage projects, we will end up with damaged private property and public property that will be a lot more expensive than the projects themselves. So I'm a proponent of getting as many of those drainage projects going and completed as possible. One thing that I do get frustration about in my capacity as a council member is continuing to talk about some of the projects, but not seeing them finished for one reason or the other. And I think our residents may feel the same way. So the more that we can complete, and if that takes an extra project manager or extra staff to get things completed, I think it will go a long way to keeping our residents happy, healthy, and safe. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Thank you, Karen.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, maybe Mr. Richards before so we did have an inquiry about drainage projects from a resident after your meeting on the 7th, and just for the public's benefit, Mr. Pierik, our city attorney, has reviewed it, and drainage projects are specifically identified by the Fair Political Practices Commission to not be, you can't be conflicted on them. They're projects that serve kind of a greater public good. So even if you are within 500 feet or immediately adjacent to a drainage project, there is a specific carve out in the FPPC their rules or act or what statute or whatever it is to exempt decision makers from having conflicts of interest on those drainage projects. So for the benefit of the public, and the council knows that, but for the benefit of the public, I just want to repeat that. I'm sorry, Mr. Richards.
Appreciate that.
No, I would just comment on, I really appreciate what you brought up, Karen, about the commitment of the county and having a firm contract with them so we know what we're getting ourselves into. And I would support that. The others, as much as I don't want to put the drainage project on hold because I think there's a risk factor that I'm afraid of, I think at this point it would probably be the best decision because we are taking on so much. So I would accept staff's recommendation with the exception of number 4, where I'd like to see a firm contract with the county.
And I'm okay with delaying them as staff recommended. Mr. Mayor, I certainly encourage you reaching out to the county with your connections and seeing, what we can find out, but without moving forward till we actually get a little more information.
Exactly. Appreciate that. Okay, do we have any other discussion? Council, we clear? Staff, are you clear what we want to do?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I think you organized the discussion very well on that topic.
Yeah, I have one more comment. Thank you. To Melanie's comment about, funding sources, I, in my mind, sort of separate, the issuance of bonds, which are just delayed requirements to pay from actual methods that get money in the door. And I'll plug, some of the things that we've talked about before. The TOT increase. I know that the council voted on it, but I think that when we do have a discussion on increasing revenues for the city, I think that there will certainly be a part for it. And my concern with the TOT is that as I said last month, is that opportunity only comes up once every 2 years. So now we're sort of 2 years behind the ball, and we'll have to sort of not start over because we never really started, but we'll have to we'll be delayed. I'd put in a plug, in terms of raising money. We have talked a lot about, Chip calls it paid parking, but I call it parking management because I do believe that a methodology of moving parking around downtown and sort of getting, sort of the hourly people out of the central core of downtown as a parking management program would do, serves 2 purposes. It not only would alleviate a lot of the congestion downtown. I truly believe that parking management is the only way to alleviate the congestion downtown. There's no other solution. But it would allow the city to raise money. It would be, it wouldn't be, I disagree with Chip. I don't think it would be on the order of $4 million a year, but I think it would be some smaller number than that. And given the parking solutions that are available now with, for example, the one that's in Monterey, or people use their phones or however it is, I think it would be fairly easy to exempt or provide some allowance for locals so that there wouldn't be, locals could park downtown for an hour or 2 and have lunch or whatever, and there wouldn't be any charge to locals. So I'm a little bit mystified by the reluctance to sort of, investigate that and figure out where that would go, both downtown and to a lesser extent on the beach as well, that we would have the Coastal Commission to contend with. And this would be my once a year plug. We have, I know that this debate is going on in a lot of cities in terms of a tax on vacant homes or unused homes. There's a debate going on in South Lake Tahoe. There was, this sort of conversation is happening all over the state in terms of vacation homes or vacation places where people own a lot of their second homes, and I do think that is something that we as a community should explore. So that's my semi-biannual plug.
Thank you.
I don't think we have a revenue problem. I think it's much more of a spending problem. The 12 million CIP is really untenable. We're taking on more than the Public Works Department can handle, and as a result, we spent $800,000 on 3 separate consultants to help manage that workload, and now we're talking about getting a full-time employee for $200,000. Basically, same thing we did last time. We're taking on more than we can handle. We really need to reduce the CIP. And once again, as Chip always says, doesn't mean that these are bad projects, but we can't just try to do everything all at once without the staff to do so. I'm also concerned with the pensions. That's why I would recommend doing a freeze on hiring with no new hires. For example, we're just talking about having a full-time employee to handle the housing element, but that is another example, and Mr. Mayor, I know you've talked about this all the time, is it's an unfunded state mandate, and this is a massive one because we're probably talking at least $150,000 or so for an employee to, do everything and comply with what the state is forcing all the cities to do. So my big thing is I really think we need to focus on cutting back some of this spending. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that completes the work for tonight, don't you?
Up to you, sir. Thank you. We will talk among ourselves and make any modifications based on your direction, and we're grateful. I want to remind the community that the almost the singular focus of the June meeting, is it the 4th, Brandon? What's the date? No, but it's June 4th, I think it is. June 4th will be the budget. We'll do our fees and the GAN limit and litany of things that are surrounding the budget. So we're prepared and very, very grateful for the input of the public. Many thanks to staff. Councilmember Filito has a comment. And
Karen.
Yes, I'd really like to thank Brandon for a very measured and slower presentation. I think our public has more time when the presentation goes as it did tonight. I think there was great information there, and I think our staff is really doing a great job. As I read through some of the questions from our residents, I was concerned about this idea of no hiring, this idea of no raises, this idea of doing away with the PERS. And I think that all is demoralizing to our staff. I appreciate everything they do. I'm sure most of you do, but we have to consider staff retention at the top of the list. And staff retention focuses on appreciation, obviously opportunities for expanding their education, but any one of our employees could walk out the door and go to another city and possibly or probably make more money. So I think we have to keep that in mind when we talk about these things, because we have a very good staff, a very responsible staff, a polite staff. We have a community that values being a clean, safe, and beautiful community. And our staff is intricate to all of that. So I would not be supportive to freezing any salaries at this point or not hiring the people that we need to get the job done. I just wanted to make that clear.
Well
Thank
said,
you.
Karen. So before I close, Chief, I think we've got an ad hoc coming up, don't we, for the PD department schedule. When is that? Do you remember?
The 6th after
When is it?
it's the 6th.
The 6th, okay.
June 6th.
You good? Yes. All righty. Well, that noted, we stand adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Well done.
Good job, Mary.
Good job.